Lizardmen society is highly stratified. Each subspecies is born for a particular role, with no real talent or inclination to stray from it. The toad-like Slann are the mystical rulers of the race, blessed with eldritch powers and wisdom beyond that of even the most learned elven lore masters. The mighty Saurus possess a knowledge of warfare beyond any mortal warrior, and make up most of their army. Kroxigors, troll-sized creatures with the brains to match, build the lizardmen's cities with oversight from more intelligent lizardmen. Skinks, lightly built and intensely skittish, do everything else. That does not mean that skinks are simply menial servants. Magically inclined individuals are highly respected, second only to the Slann in importance. For those skinks spawned without magical talents, however, less glamorous duties do tend to await. Many farm, forage, or hunt within the jungle. Others assist the Kroxigors in construction duty, directing their dull-witted relatives in their tasks. The most ferocious skinks, however, serve in the lizardmen's armies as auxiliary units. They act as skirmishers and ambushers, making up what they lack in physical prowess with speed and cunning. Some will also direct the lizardmen's beasts of war, leading salamanders, pterodons, and stegodons into battle against the enemies of the Great Plan. It's through immense bravery and talent in these positions that a non-magical skink can achieve glory in lizardmen society. The most revered position such a skink can rise to is becoming a temple city's Master of Skies. While each city has its own Master of Skies, and many skinks have held a role in each city throughout the millennia, there is no more impressive individual to hold the office than Tic-tac-toe. As of 2522 IC, Tic-tac-toe has been Hexoatl's Master of Skies for several years. Riding atop his loyal pterodon Zwup, Tic-tac-toe spends most of his time fulfilling his duties as Master of Skies. This includes leading the city's pterodon and riprodactyl rider units into battle, and assuming command of the city's defenses if Hexoatl's Slann or skink priests are otherwise indisposed. When not marshalling the Lizardman Air Force, Tic-tac-toe can be found patrolling Hexoatl's hinterlands for potential threats. Rampaging monsters and potential invaders are spotted, identified, and either redirected or appropriately dispatched. He'll spend days or months at a time away from the city, roosting in hidden areas throughout the jungle. Crumbling ruins, flying islands bound into clouds with mystical chains, and secret fortresses carved into titanic trees all act as Tic-tac-toe's roost during his lengthy patrols, letting him rest and restore his strength during these expeditions. He has performed excellently in both these roles, and the fact that the Temple City still stands is a testament to his skill. As Hexoatl's Master of Skies, Tic-tac-toe has been gifted two magical artifacts of wondrous power to both aid him in his duties and act as symbols of his station. The first is the Blade of Ancient Skies, a weapon carved from the jawbone of an extinct aerial predator from an age long past. The second is the Mask of Heavens, a golden face mask that lets its wearer meld their minds with nearby pterodons. These have been covered in depth in prior videos, which will be linked below, but it's important to know that these items make Tic-tac-toe an unparalleled master of aerial combat. The Blade of Ancient Skies is supernaturally potent against flying opponents, and ignores even the thickest armor, while the pterodon mind meld given by the Mask of Heavens lets Tic-tac-toe and Zwup act as one in the sky. Armed with such divine gifts, Tic-tac-toe can hold his own against even the fiercest flying monsters in the Warhammer world, if not win outright. Despite his enchanted armaments, Tic-tac-toe's most dangerous asset is his incredible battlefield awareness. The Master of Skies excels at picking and choosing his battles, understanding exactly where and when he needs to strike in order to inflict maximum damage upon the enemies of Hexoatl. Not only can Tic-tac-toe pick out those weaknesses, he's also a talented enough rider to exploit them. His favorite strategy is surprising an enemy flank or isolated unit with a battalion of pterodon riders. Tic-tac-toe accomplishes these daring raids by flying along perilous paths that an enemy wouldn't normally expect an aerial force to traverse, using his incredible skill and command of nearby pterodons to glide through lustrous, dense jungles. This lets him catch foes totally unprepared from a supposedly protected flank. Tic-tac-toe and his pterodons will then destroy their flat-footed foes, savaging them with cruel beaks or dropping massive boulders on their heads. If such a surprise attack isn't feasible, Tic-tac-toe and his followers are also perfectly comfortable just flying over their opponents, using their incredible aerial mobility to dodge incoming bullets, arrows, and javelins. Only an exceptionally skilled or lucky marksman can hope to hit Tic-tac-toe and his fellows. The Pterodon mind meld bestowed by the Mask of Heavens lets nearby Pterodon riders react as one with their mount, giving them the speed and awareness needed to duck and weave around hostile projectiles. From there, they can wreak havoc upon the enemy back lines, savaging ranged units, spellcasters, and war machines with unparalleled ferocity. Tic-tac-toe's battle record, while short compared to the likes of ancient lizardmen like Krokgar and Gorok, is still very impressive. He has spotted and either slain or redirected more warm-blooded colonizers and rampaging beasts than any other skink chief in recorded history during his patrols around Hexoatl. He once broke the will of the Blue Viper savage orc tribe single-handedly, commanding Zwup to snatch the orc warboss in his terrible claws before flying thousands of feet into the heavens. At the peak of his ascent, Tic-tac-toe ordered Zwup to release the Howling Greenskin. The orcs, despite their infamous lust for battle, couldn't stomach the indignity of their leader's screaming dissent and fled the field in terror. A huge force of Pterodon riders pursued the savages, reducing them to a fraction of their former might and ensuring they wouldn't trouble the Lizardmen for decades to come. Tic-tac-toe's most famous exploits, however, center around the Chaos invasion of Lustria, late in the 2521st year of the Imperial calendar. As winter fell around the more temperate portions of the Warhammer world in 2521 IC, the Slann of Lustria found themselves magically blinded to the outside world. Chaos warriors and beastmen had defiled key loci of the geomantic web throughout the year, weakening the Great Warding. This left the Slann unable to predict what would come next. Without their foresight or mystical senses, the Lizardmen weren't able to automatically detect a massive horde of Chaos Warriors, Beastmen, and Dark Elf mercenaries when they entered the Jungle Continent. Led by the anointed Chaos Lord Vashnar the Tormentor, these deviants had passed through Nagaroth and were hoping to invade Lustria from the north. Vashnar's mission was the most ambitious chaotic exploit since Azavar's cool invasion of Kislev. He sought to raise the temple city of Hexoatl, home to Mazdamundi, the mightiest Slann mage priest alive today. Fortunately, Tic-tac-toe was not affected by the weakening of the geomantic web. He spotted Vashnar's army while on patrol, and quickly sent word to the City of the Sun of the impending danger. Unfortunately, Mazdamundi was absent, contemplating newfound sacred plaques deep in the jungle, and the other Slann would take days to awaken. This was time the Lizardmen did not have. Vashnar and his chaotic horde would surround the city long before that, maybe within the day. Knowing that time was of the essence, Tic-tac-toe delegated the preparation of the city's defenses before taking off once more with a unit of Pterodon riders. For 3 days and nights, the brave skinks and their loyal mounts harried, harassed, and tormented the army's supply lines in vulnerable positions. On the 4th day, the enemy cavalry was so agitated that they leapt at a seeming weakness in the Lizardmen Air Force and pursued them into Bloodleech Swamp. The foolish invaders were easily led into ambushes and cut down to the last. By the time Vashnar forbid his horsemen from pursuing Tic-tac-toe and his strike force, nearly all the Dark Elf and Norskin cavalry had been slain. These efforts slowed the Warm Bloods, but they couldn't be stopped completely. Later that day, Vashnar and his army began to encircle Hexoatl. The time that Tic-tac-toe bought the city had proven to be invaluable. During his skirmishes, the younger Slann had finally awoken and taken control of the city's defenses. At first, they tried to meet the Chaos Warriors in the open field and break the siege completely. The chaotic host was too much for them, however, and the Saurus were forced to beat an orderly retreat back into the city. Things could have gone worse, however. Though the Lizardmen were confined to Hexoatl, there was still enough lizard power to hold the walls and wait for reinforcements. That was when Vashnar deployed his secret weapon. Demonic war engines, never before seen in Lustria, were set up within range of the temple city's walls. Their infernal engineering and metallurgy fired unholy ammunition at the city. Wherever they aimed, great holes were rent in Hexoatl's walls, and through them poured screaming beastmen and heavily armored chaos warriors. While the stalwart Sauruses could hold the line, it was clear that the city wouldn't be able to withstand the demonic barrage. It was time for Hexoatl's Master of Skies to take center stage once more. During the siege, Tic-tac-toe had not been idle. He had taken refuge in the surrounding jungle alongside a large contingent of Pterodon riders, and they had continued to harass the besieging army from their hidden outposts. These war machines demanded immediate action, however. Tic-tac-toe led several daring raids against the Chaos Artillery, dropping boulders and sentient cannons, and slaying their crews with poisonous javelins. Over the course of 62 days, Tic-tac-toe managed to destroy or sabotage most of Vashnar's demonic war machines. This bought Hexoatl enough time for both Lord Mazdamundi and Kroq-Gar to rally two massive armies and liberate the city. While ultimately Mazdamundi personally annihilated half of Vashnar's soldiers with a single spell, and Kroq-Gar slew the Tormentor in personal combat, they never would have reached the city in time if Tic-tac-toe hadn't been a massive thorn in the Chaos Lord's side throughout the entire invasion. Tic-tac-toe's actions saved Hexoatl, and alongside it the rest of Lustria, making him one of the most important skinks to ever roam the skies. As far as I can tell, Games Workshop totally forgot about Tic-tac-toe in the end times. Unless his doom was covered in some minor text box, or I suck at reading comprehension, I couldn't find any records about him around this time. That's probably for the best, as it means I can believe that he just flew to safety as the Lizardmen abandoned the Warhammer world in their spaceship temple cities. Yes, that was a thing. Is it stupid? Undoubtedly. Is it awesome? Also undoubtedly. In Total War Warhammer, Tic-tac-toe is introduced as the Free LC Lord accompanying the Prophet and the Warlock DLC. He leads the Tiktaq'to Lizardmen faction, located in the Southlands in the Vortex, Mortal Empires, and Immortal Empires campaign maps. On the Vortex map, he chases after the Vortex like most of the early Game 2 Free LC Lords. In the other maps, Tic-tac-toe is mostly focused on pacifying the Southlands and Lustria. All in all, he has pretty standard objectives for a Lizardman Lord, and you could spend hours painting the Warhammer map with Tiktaq'to's pleasing, orangish-yellowish faction color. Tic-tac-toe takes on his personality as the Lizardman's preeminent aerial warrior through his faction and army-specific buffs, however. As a faction leader, Tic-tac-toe's buffs are a bit lackluster in my opinion. First, when playing as Tiktaq'to, all skink heroes you recruit, be they skink chiefs or priests, start mounted on a pterodon. That's not a bad bonus by any means, but I tend to put my skink heroes on stegodons as soon as possible, and skip over the pterodon option. It's really more of a flavor thing, as his position as Master of Skies means all skink followers have at least a passing familiarity with riding pterodons. Still, it meshes well with Tic-tac-toe's hypermobile battle strategies, so it does have some utility. It's also nice on low-level skink priests with the Lore of Beasts, as there are a few things more satisfying than a well-placed amber spear delivered from pterodon back. This is definitely Tiktaq'to's most eye-catching trait, but was also definitely better when you had to spend your points unlocking these mounts. Tiktaq'to's next faction bonus is that all characters have their line of sight increased by 25%. This increased line of sight is a callback to Tic-tac-toe's role as Hexoatl's chief scout, as his eagle eyes have spotted and alerted the Temple City to more dangers than any other skink chief in history. In game, this is a very passive bonus, and it might not have an influence on most campaigns. When it does matter though, it's super nice. That little boost can be enough to spot an otherwise unbeatable army before it can reach you, giving you another turn to prepare or flee. If you're the kind of player who bothers using heroes to scout in the first place, this bonus just makes them even better at that task. As I understand it, this is pretty important for people playing on legendary difficulty, so that's cool. If I've ever benefited from it though, I've never really noticed. Tiktaq'to's enhanced line of sight does play well with some of its other faction bonuses, however. Instead of the right of Sotek, Tiktaq'to has the right of Zunki. This right unlocks when Tic-tac-toe reaches level 5 and costs 2,500 gold to perform. In return, all of your armies can basically double forced march in a single turn. As long as you don't enter into a proper forced march stance, you can still attack people in this mode, letting you dart across half the map and getting the drop on somebody without them knowing it. Even if you do march, it's very useful in running away from overwhelming odds if the need arises. That heavy price point makes it difficult to use while you're still getting your economy online, but if you want to get somewhere fast in the late game, there are worse faction effects to have. So far, nearly all of Tic-tac-toe's faction effects have been a bit lackluster, at least in my opinion. Most are highly situational. His last listed faction ability, however, is pretty good, and comes up in most cases. All pterodons, both the normal and Fire Leech Bolas variants, get an additional Drop Rocks ability. Normal pterodons drop Rocks of Sundering, which do more damage than a normal rock drop, and reduce enemy armor by 30. This has some nice synergy with Saurus and Skink Infantry, who usually deal non-armor piercing damage, with some exceptions. Fire Leech Bolas pterodons can drop Rocks of Chotek, the old one of the sun. These rocks do more damage than normal rock drops, inflict the flammable debuff for 20 seconds, and deal fire damage themselves. By combining the flammable trait with the damage a Fire Leech Bolas normally inflicts, you can get a lot of mileage out of these pterodons against enemy infantry. Again, this is a faction effect, so any Pterodon Rider unit in any army can do a lot more damage than if they were part of another Lizardmen faction. At the very least, it makes the random Pterodon Riders you get in garrisons semi-useful. This is a big reason to play Tiktaq'to as a faction, instead of just confederating Tic-tac-toe. On top of all these bonuses, it's worth noting that Tiktaq'to has two faction bonuses that aren't listed on the selection screen. First, Tiktaq'to can build the Ripperdactyl Hatchery building a level earlier than other Lizardmen, unlocking access to the powerful Ripperdactyl and Hexoatl units earlier in the game than any other Lizardmen. You can also build a Ripperdactyl Hatchery in a minor settlement with this change, freeing up a slot in your main settlements for bigger, more useful buildings. In addition to this, Tic-tac-toe's faction begins play with a tablet of beasts and sequence of exotic weapon and technologies already researched, ensuring that his pterodons start with a bit more speed and ammunition than any other Lizardmen's initial pterodons. This gap can be closed through research, but it's nice that Tic-tac-toe has some early bonuses to his pterodons. While his faction abilities are a bit meh, Tic-tac-toe's personal trait is actually pretty nice. His character-specific trait, the Eye in the Heaven, reduces Pterodon, Ripperdactyl, and Hexoatl upkeep cost by 50% and gives his whole army a plus 10 melee attack boost in foreign territory. Both these bonuses are useful for different reasons. The upkeep reduction makes it super easy for Tic-tac-toe to fill his entire army with cheap Pterodon Riders in the early game, which is very dangerous for the greenskins and vampires he fights on the Immortal Empires map. The plus 10 melee attack boost lets you blitzkrieg the early game, as that can make even your skinks an absolute powerhouse when besieging a settlement. It applies in all foreign territory too, so you can fight neutral ground and still get a hefty bonus to your army's melee attack. It doesn't help at all when defending your own territory though, which is kind of funny considering that Tic-tac-toe's most famous actions revolve around protecting Hexoatl from Vashnar the Tormentor. Tic-tac-toe's skill tree, just like his personal trait, is full of useful bits and bobs for his mostly aerial army. He can drop spheres of Tepok, which function like drop rocks but reduces an enemy's speed by 60% for a fair amount of time. You can use this to cover a land unit's escape, or slow down part of the enemy formation that you don't really feel like fighting at that moment. The Master of Sky's other skills are focused around making him a better duelist, or his air force even deadlier. Precision Strike increases his army's leadership and melee attack when attacking, leaning into Tic-tac-toe's role as a preemptive aggressor. Fearless Leader increases his hit points, weapon strength, and charge bonus, making him even better at hunting down single-entity, high-value units. Aerial Superiority and Ares' Finest improves his Pterodons, Ripperdactyls, and Hexoatls, increasing their speed, ammunition, physical resistance, recruit rank, casualty replenishment, and missile strength. When all these bonuses are combined, you can make Pterodons a semi-decent long-term unit in Tic-tac-toe's army. Even if you have no interest in running a Lizardman Air Force with his army, why would you do that though? His Skink Commander skill increases the hero capacity of Skink Chiefs by 2, and their recruit rank by 4 provided Tic-tac-toe is present in the province when they're recruited. This is pretty good, as you can never have too many heroes running around the campaign map, especially since Skink Chiefs increase casualty replenishment for any army they join, which is, in my opinion, one of the most useful hero abilities in the game. In combat, just like on the campaign map, Tic-tac-toe is kind of a janky lord. On paper, he's solid. High physical resistance, lots of AP weapon strength, good melee attack and melee defense, and his magical items and personal combat skills that improve his combat prowess further while flying make him really dangerous to airborne opponents. He's not perfect, as his low armor and small hit point pool are already glaring weaknesses, but he's solid. In practice, however, Tic-tac-toe suffers from weird animations and a big hitbox that reduces strengths and make his weaknesses even more apparent. This doesn't make him bad, but it does mean you'll need to spend a lot of time babysitting the Master of Skies. Any kind of infantry or cavalry can shoot through him with relative ease, and even units he can kill tend to take way longer than they should. If you let him fly into a unit of spearmen or swordsmen and just let him sit there, you deserve to lose him for free. So how do you get value from Tic-tac-toe? Well, he has all the usual advantages of a flying unit. He's guaranteed to get his charge off on land-dwelling targets, and he has enough mass to be decent at cycle charging. What Tic-tac-toe excels at, however, is assassination. Glass cannon single-entity units, especially those that fly, are super vulnerable to sniping attempts from Tic-tac-toe. He can kill sun dragons, hydras, and other moderately expensive centerpiece units quickly and easily. Tic-tac-toe can also reduce generic foot characters like Empire Generals and Exalted Heroes to mincemeat in a head-on fight, though this takes longer than monsters because they can be knocked down by Zawub's buffeting wings. Don't get me wrong, he's not the perfect assassin. Guys like Karl Franz and Malicious will put Tic-tac-toe on the ground, and that's when they're mounted on their flying units. Still, his cheap price point in multiplayer, a mere 1,450 gold when fully kitted out, which you should definitely do, means that you can get good value when trading into expensive flying lords. Even if you take a fight you can't actually win, you're probably going to come out ahead from a gold perspective. There are some notable exceptions to Tic-tac-toe's role as an assassin, however. First, keep him away from anything with a significant anti-large bonus. His melee defense is good, but not good enough to withstand hits from a Bloodthirster or Terrorgeist. Characters like Ungrim Iron Fist can beat him up with almost no consequences. Secondly, avoid cheap monsters or monsters with huge hit point pools. Giants only cost 1,400 gold, but have 7,000 hit points and good combat stats. They'll wallop Tic-tac-toe before he even gets close to paying for himself. Finally, and this isn't really an exception as much as something to remember, but Tic-tac-toe is really slow at killing things. Too slow to be a proper character assassin. Even in matchups where he does well, it takes about 5 minutes of sustained combat for the Master Skies to break whatever he's trying to kill, which is 5 minutes that the enemy can bring something to scare him off. I know I've been a little critical of Tic-tac-toe throughout this video, but I really like playing him. That being said, you're probably better off bringing basically any other Lizardman Lord in multiplayer if you want your Lord to do damage. Even Golrock can stand on an objective and hold the line in domination mode. Still, Tic-tac-toe can be a nice tech piece if you want to bring the Lizardman Air Force. The extra melee defense and armor granted to nearby flying units from the Mask of Heavens is a game changer, and he can take down real powerhouses when accompanied by a unit of souped-up Colossadon Hunters or generic Riprodactyl Riders. Kind of a meme lord, but fun, and if you're just looking to play a game for fun, this is the guy to do it with. With our Total War segment completed, we have come to the end of our overview of Tic-tac-toe. This video is near and dear to me, and not just because I love playing as micro-intensive army composition in Total War. This is my first Legendary Lord video, something which I've wanted to do since I started this channel. I know I'm usually the go-to guy for the more niche parts of the setting, but I do love learning and talking about the special characters that give the Warhammer world such character. There's relatively little on Tic-tac-toe compared to, say, Karl Franz or Malicious, so that made a video covering him fairly simple to do. If you like listening to this, you should also know that it was initially released on my Patreon 4 months ago. That's where I put my longer, 15+ minute long videos before sending them over to you fine people on YouTube. I try to get those out once every 2 months, and for $5 a month, you can get them as they're released. If the concept of paying for stuff breaks your heart though, don't worry. As you can see here, all the videos I put on Patreon will eventually make their way to the YouTube channel. Just like my Horned Ones video, I'm releasing this video now as an end-of-year present to everybody. That's all I have to say for now though, so until next time, this has been Sigmar's Chosen, signing off for now.